Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the Champions Chess Tour finale of 2023. One of the last epic chess events that we have of this calendar year, featuring an all-star lineup, and it is currently being held in Toronto, Canada, where I will soon be going. I'm only delayed at home as I'm recovering from illness, and I'm going to be making this recap for all of you. $500,000 worth of prizes. Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, the two big names, but we have Fabiano Caruana, we have Wesley So, we have Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Alireza Firouzja, okay? We have Nodirbek Abdusatorov, and we have the youngster from Belarus, and that is Denis Lazovic. It is 8 players. They play a round robin, then there's a playoff system, and today we had games 1 and 2. We had rounds 1 and 2, and you're gonna wanna watch this whole recap because the last game I'm gonna show you has probably the move of the day. These games were exciting, ferocious. I hope I didn't forget any players. We're gonna cover the games of everybody. I'm gonna feature incredible moments from all sorts of different games all over the board. And, you know, just in case you don't believe me, I won't put an ad on this video in like the last 7 minutes. There's gonna be no, so because I need you to see the move of the day, all right? Magnus Carlsen opened up against the 8th seed Denis Lazovic. The statistics said that Denis Lazovic has an 0% chance of winning this event. That is insulting. Let's see. Magnus opens with d4, and Denis Lazovic plays a solid Queen's Gambit decline setup. He doesn't play DC. He doesn't play the semi-Tarrasch. He literally just plays the uber solid Queen's Gambit decline. Denis Lazovic is a very solid player. In fact, he, I believe, boasts the highest average accuracy over a certain period of time in these rapid games. The format is 15-minute with 3 seconds bonus time. They play 2 games against each other, and if it's tied 1-1, they play Armageddon. In the Armageddon, you bid for a certain amount of time. Black starts with less time, but a draw is actually a win for black. That is the way they break the tie in these events. Oh, crack my neck. Here we go. Magnus plays an exchange Queen's Gambit declined, and Denis Lazovic immediately goes after his bishop. This is the opening game of the event, so you're kind of getting a sense of who's in what form, who's feeling confident. Magnus volunteers his bishop for capture, and then he plays g3, bishop d3, and then he plays this move h4. Very interesting and provocative approach by Magnus, looking for potential h5 ideas, while accepting that he could have light-scored weaknesses in the future, but he does have a very, very strong dark-scored setup for now. Knight a6, and now Lazovic is trying to go here. He probably thought Magnus is going to play a3 in this position, and then he's going to wrap around the knight at some point. But instead of that, after knight to a6, Magnus takes the knight, removing his other bishop completely from, that's a massive decision. And now he's trying to play this type of position versus the young man from Belarus. Doubled A pawns, potential weakness of a C pawn, and Magnus will play knights versus bishops. Horses versus pointed hats. Castles by Magnus. He understands that the light scores are weak, but there's no way for Denis to really exploit them. So now rook e1. Knight e5, look at this. Look at Magnus's knights dancing around the board, taking advantage of some of those weakened squares. That was a massive decision he made earlier, but his knights are looking good. Denis Lazovic threatens a mate against Magnus. Looks unstoppable, but you're forgetting, or maybe you're not forgetting, you're waiting for me to tell you, knight takes bishop. And now, when everything is said and done, one guy just has a little bit too much of a weakness. Queen c2, rook c1, and we go for an endgame. Queens and rooks. But when you're playing the GOAT, and in particular his skill is technical play and endgames, it's going to be really difficult. And you can try to trade as many pawns as you want, but Magnus sends us to an endgame where he's picking up pawns. And I got to tell you though, Denis is not going anywhere. He's got a couple of weaknesses, but somehow he's turned this into a bit of a mess. Magnus has to take and go after that pawn, but look at Denis's A pawn. Rook d2. Rook a8, and I don't actually think that Denis is all that worse anymore. According to the computer, Magnus has this incredible cluster, but somehow Denis is doing a good job. But he's Magnus. And despite all of his best efforts, look at Denis rushing a little bit. Apparently, Denis should have went here and just stayed exactly like that. And believe it or not, Magnus can't do anything. You might be confused. You might go, what do you mean? He won the pawn. Yeah, he won the pawn, but his king is cut off from the entire board. And Dennis actually had a chance to save the endgame. But because Dennis rushed with his pawns and tried to trade a little bit too quickly, what ended up happening was he played rook b1 and rook f1, and Magnus created a barrier and then managed to run his king over and obtained a winning position by getting to an unbreakable setup and just advancing his g-pawn. And Dennis had to resign. It was a really valiant effort. Dennis opened the day by nearly saving an endgame against Magnus down 2 pawns. He ended up losing. It was a good win for Magnus, an expected win, if you will, and Dennis has nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, that was a very, very, very good start. Now, I got some epic games for you. Hikaru versus Wesley in round number 1. You will remember, if you were watching the event last year in Toronto, that Wesley was the one that knocked Hikaru out completely in the semifinal. Hikaru opens with one of my favorites, the Trempowski. Unfortunately, all top grandmasters, they play the critical lines, which is d5, c5. Hikaru sends us to a position with damaged structure. Wesley's going to win that pawn back soon. There it is. He has won it back. Hikaru here throws in kind of a dislodging check. Wesley blocks. Very flashy move. If you take the knight, there is rook c8 and stuff on c1, so Hikaru doesn't blunder that. And instead, we have a very solid position. Wesley has one of the highest accuracies, also one of the hardest people to beat in the world. He's so solid. And look at this, trying to trade Hikaru's pieces off. And before you know it, it is Wesley So who has activated the pieces and is calling the shots, knocking on the door of Hikaru's position. Hikaru now scrambling. Wesley trades the queens. Pressure still being applied. And Wesley is just swarming. I mean, his knight, his rook, his bishop, all poking at Hikaru's position. Hikaru trying to trade some pieces off. But Wesley's not going anywhere. Wesley sniping with the bishop. Hikaru under a minute. Now Wesley starts taking a little bit too much time. He's got 40 seconds on the clock. No, whoa, knight takes f2. A tactic has been landed on Hikaru. Bishop takes. Bishop back to b6. f5. Oh my goodness, a pawn explosion. Wesley coming down that side of the board. 7 seconds versus 12. All of this was a crazy scramble, and it ended with something completely insane as Hikaru ends up in a position. It's coming, don't worry. King e4, king f3, scrambling, crazy position, knight f5, and Wesley has to give away a rook. He sacrifices his rook, but he does it because he's just going to start marching his pawn. And Hikaru manages to scramble his way out of this situation and make a draw. Wesley's king gets trapped on the outskirts of the board, and under the threat of mate, we start shuffling and repeating moves. But Hikaru doesn't make a draw and instead blunders the game. He blunders the game. He had a draw on the board. It was exactly like last year in Toronto. But he went for it. It was Hikaru's birthday, actually, December 9th. And he just went for it. He thought he was creating a checkmate net. But this move covers this, but also gets the king an escape route. And that's it. Wesley's just winning. The pawn's just going to go. Pawn's just going to go. The pawn makes it to h2. Hikaru just resigns. He just resigns because rook h8, bishop h6. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And Hikaru goes down against Wesley. He lost the next game as well. Yeah, it was hard. I mean, you got to try to win with black, and maybe he didn't lose. Maybe it was a draw, but Wesley beats Hikaru for a 2nd year in a row in Toronto. Crazy stuff. Next one I have for you. This was an unbelievable match between Caruana and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. This is still the first round. It's an imbalanced Grunfeld, right? We have f3, a bit of a sideline. We have takes, and we're going to get a bunch of theory here that's about to plop out on the board. All of this has been played many times before. Bishop to h6. Takes. Knight takes d4. A pawn has been captured. f4, and now knight f3. White is going on a big attack. Both sides are not really thinking. They're just playing their moves instantly. White now wins the pawn back. And now we have officially the first new moment of the game. 18 moves into it. Bishop d3. Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't bishop. I think it was bishop d3 because here Maxime spent 2 minutes. So they play a very cutting-edge line. Opposite side castling. MVL makes an inaccuracy on the first move out of the opening. The computer wants pawn to h4 already. But I think... Oh, my neck is so stiff. But instead of h4, Fabiano does this, and he does that to open up his light-scored bishop. Then we have a trade. And now look at this tactical shot, pawn to d6. That pawn's going to be a problem. Queen g7, And now it's going to be a problem because I don't even have to attack you. How are you going to defend yourself against the pawn on d6? Bishop d5. The computer already thinks black is a bit out of danger, but it's still a very difficult position to play as a human. Rook e7 check. MVL is defending himself along the 7th rank, but I gotta tell you, it is not a very pleasant position. Takes, bishop back to e8. Rook e1. Rook e6. Disconnecting. Now Maxime makes a run for it. Rook b6, rook e7. But now here comes the check. And the pawns are falling. g5 from Maxime. King to d2. Rook d7. And it looks like Fabiano is going to get it done because at the end of the day, he gets the bishop back. Too many pawns. Too many pawns in the rook endgame. Rook f2, he just needs to get a little bit of breathing room. Rook h6, and he's just up 2 pawns. He's just up, now he's up 3 pawns. And in this position, Maxime resigned. Maxime actually won the next game against Fabiano, but then he lost the Armageddon. So Fabiano wins his first matchup, so does Wesley, so does Magnus. And there's one more in the first round that was nuts. Firouzja versus Nodjerbek. All right, this one, an exchange queen's game of decline, just like the game against Magnus versus Lazovic, but the bishop was on a different square. None of that is important. What's important is he plays the principled approach, which is f3 against the queen's gambit declined exchange variation, bishop f2, and pawn to e4. That's the plan that he's going to try to implement, and all his pieces are coming back as Nodjerbek is pressuring. But at some point, once Alireza gets rolling, he is red hot. He's like a locomotive. h3 is going to make a couple of preparatory moves. But if Alireza can successfully play e4, he's going to win the game. What I mean by successfully is if he's able to implement the game plan. Rook c3, uh-oh. There it is, big moment in the game. Everything in White's position is fully geared toward that move. Listen, Black's got good pieces. He got this, he got the rook over here, bang, bang. He's got the bishop sniper. But when the board is about to open up, Alireza is arriving, and he is knocking on the door of the Black's king's position. Nodjerbek is so desperate, he's trying to trade that bishop off so it doesn't participate in the attack. That was not the best move. The best move was not to allow a lot of this. But what about the knight? Who is the knight intimidating? And the knight gets attacked, so it's got to move. And here comes Alireza. And it's just a matter of time until all these pieces start landing haymakers, and you don't have to wait. Knight takes g7. When you're starting an attack in chess, you always need to look at things only the king protects. Knight f5 check. There goes the rook zipping in, and coincidentally also blocking that diagonal. And queen takes h6 is mate, so he's got to sack his queen. And it's not good enough. Queen h6 is a sniper. f6 would lead to queen g6. You pick this up, you win in a couple of moves. Nodjerbek Abdusattorov succumbs to the brilliant attacking chess of Alireza Firouzja, who came to play. I said before the event in my predictions video that I did for chess.com, Alireza is the biggest wild card. You don't know which Alireza is showing up. And in the first round, he showed up and he showed out. Now, my friends, round 2 was crazy. Nodjerbek has to go from losing to Alireza Firouzja to now playing Magnus Carlsen. It's a round robin. And the way this round robin works is the bottom 2 are eliminated. If you finish last or 7th in the round robin, you go home or stay home until your flight. If you're top 2, you make it to the semifinals. 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th play a double round robin among themselves, the survival stage to be 3rd and 4th seed. All right? 2 to the semis, 2 go home, 4 compete for the last 2 spots. So, Magnus Carlsen opens with e4. This is their Armageddon game. You will notice Nodjerbek has 9.5 minutes. What does that mean? It means they drew their 2 regular games and they went to Armageddon and they bid, they wager a certain amount of time to play with Black, because remember, when you play with Black in Armageddon, a draw is a win. So you get 2 results but less time. So Magnus now needs to win on demand. That's not easy to do when the guy's got 10 minutes, but he's got to play in a way that's going to keep pieces on the board, keep things tense. Magnus playing a Spanish. D5. Nodjerbek is trying to force something. Why? Less time. Not enough time to maneuver, take, right? Look at Magnus. No queen trade, maneuvering, close position. We traded a pawn, that's all you're going to get. I'll go back to my home square. Here comes my knight. You can't take my queen. B3. Why B3? Slow play. Nodjerbek is the one that has to think. But he can't think. He's got to make moves instantly. Bishop F8, and he is. He's playing fast, but there's Magnus. Now Magnus asking questions. Now, he's not up as much time as he was in the beginning of the game, but Nodjerbek spends 30 seconds. Magnus takes back in 2. Now Magnus firmly plants that knight on d5. Trades this knight, activates his rook. Plays a4. This is a big moment in the game. Nojibek has the closest time situation he's had all game. But here's Magnus. Ready for that queenside pressure. Nojibek spends 1 entire remaining minute on rook d8. Magnus plays bishop b4. 1.5 minutes spent. It's now less than a 2-minute advantage. Bishop c5. But Magnus still throwing things that way. And Nojibek, very big decision here. The best move for black, apparently according to the computers, to take. And then to take the knight, allow this, rook c7, cd5, survive. But instead of that, Nojibek does this. And he spends another minute. Remember, Nojibek is at this point spending 20% of his remaining time on each move. It's very tense. It's very hard to do that. And when the dust settles, Magnus is infiltrating on the queen side and posing massive problems. Queen e1 defending his pawn. Nojibek has to make something happen. He's only got 2.5 minutes to do it. 2.5 minutes and no bonus time. Queen a7, and he's won a pawn. And he's still calling the shots. He's going to win that pawn too. And when it's all said and done, there's a beautiful tactic, sacrificing the rook. The idea is king f7, rook b7 check, discovered attack on the queen, queen a4 counter sack, but now rook takes g7. Rook a4, rook d1. But when the dust settles, remember that Lazovic endgame? This one's even worse. In the Lazovic endgame, at least Lazovic had a passed a pawn. No, it's all on the same side. Takes Magnus 45 moves, but he gets it done. 2 for 2 from Magnus. He won both matchups today. First one, nice win against Lazovic. This one, nice Armageddon grind against Nojibek. Now, Hikaru, bouncing back from the defeat to Wesley So, is playing Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. All right? So, we open up the game. It's a Trompowsky, just like he played against Wesley So. Where are we going to take a different turn? Okay, knight c6. Wesley put a knight on d7, if you might remember. Maybe you don't. This game went completely off the rails. This game was nuts. Completely off the rails. So, Maxime is the world's best poker player because this man played the opening so fast. Look how fast Maxime is playing the opening. All of this gets blitzed out, and Maxime puts his king on e7. Does he also have this prepared? The knight goes to a6, Hikaru develops, doesn't trade queens, Maxime goes queen c5, and Hikaru just castles and has a clearly better position. Apparently it's so good that despite him being down a pawn, right, 5-6, black's king is so bad, and white has so many light square opportunities and potential to attack on the queen side, he's in good shape, bishop g7. But Maxime played so fast, it's like, okay, Hikaru plays rook b1, rook b8. Now, white is better. And Hikaru plays knight g3 to put the knight on f5. Bishop f8 move, right? Oh my goodness. But notice Hikaru's time advantage is gone. Because he knows he's better, but he's probably calculating knight g3 right now. He's maybe looking at c4, potentially to weaken the e4 square. So very tough position. He does put his knight on f5 and king e8. Hikaru makes a couple of preparatory pawn moves, but that cost him time. Apparently the advantage is already gone. I mean, I don't know. You know, we look at Stockfish, we go, oh, white is better. But this game goes completely insane. Maxime starts taking over. He's like, you gave me a pawn. Now Hikaru's down. I've never seen Hikaru open a tournament this shaky. Maybe a little bit of birthday jitters. I don't know what it was. But he's shuffling a lot. Maxime starts taking over. And we get into a scramble. Both guys, about 3 minutes on the clock. Maxime's still up a pawn, so he's playing for a win. 1 minute on the clock now each. Now we go less than 1 minute. Hikaru is getting busted up. Queen e2, queen c4, queen c8. He's down 2 pawns. He could take on b5, but then he's going to lose a rook. Oh my goodness. Maxime defending himself. 20 seconds now. Less than 20 for Maxime. Queen e8. White is apparently not worse, but all of a sudden we're in a queen and bishop versus queen and knight, and white is not worse. White's losing. White is going to be losing this game. Hikaru giving checks. Apparently here, queen g3 now is saving the day. Queen g3, but it's chaos. Less than 10 seconds. Queen d2. Knight g7. The king is going to run out. That's it. Hikaru's losing. Queen h. Oh my goodness. Centralizing everything. Maxime's going to push his b pawn. Hikaru's about to start this tournament with 3 games in a row losing. Oh, and Maxime hangs his bishop. Maxime hangs his bishop with a fork. Queen f5 check. And Hikaru wins a pawn. Oh my god. Is he winning? Is it a draw? The pawn might be too far. He's got too many pawns. And as fate would have it, it's too many pawns. Even though Hikaru is up a full piece, Black is threatening something like queen d2. For example, you play h4, queen d2 is game over for black. Black actually wins. So the players make a draw. An insane game and a shaky start to the event for Hikaru. Uncharacteristic. Crazy stuff. They drew the second game and they go to the Armageddon. Crazy story. They bet the same amount of time. The first time they wagered time in the Armageddon, they made the same minute, same second. So they had to bet again, and this time Hikaru outbid Maxime by 20 seconds. 9:38 on the clock. This was a double Petrov. This is called Damiano's variation. White wins a knight, but black spends the entire opening striking at the center. Excuse me. And the position is actually okay for black. Knight b4, very sharp line, very complicated. White loses the right to castle. And as you can see, I mean, Hikaru is just rattling off moves. This game gets crazy. Hikaru ends up castling his king. Both guys are attacking each other. I mean, b4 is just lunacy. Insane position. White's king is in the center. Remember, Hikaru is not playing to win or... I mean, he can make a draw. He doesn't care. But he's playing to make Maxime think. Look at queen a7. This is insane. Hikaru is 2 pawns down in the Armageddon game. But he's not worse. He's not worse because there's monster counterattacking chances. Maxime has to go here. Spends 2 minutes. Loses the pawn on g2. Okay? Rook h7 threatens mate. Hikaru goes for a queen trade. He didn't have to do it. He could have played rook g7. Goes here. Queen a6. And now that pawn's not scaring anybody. That pawn's nothing. King's already in the square. Bishop c5. But Hikaru's down a lot of time. Can he fight back? You wager this much time in the Armageddon because you believe that with this little time on the clock, you can still outplay your opponents. Take. Hikaru's going to stop the pawn. Maxime is now better. But suddenly, here comes Hikaru's pawn all the way down to g2. Now Maxime's pieces have to defend against it. King f4. It's going to be a draw. Rook e7. Hikaru's stabilizing. King f5. Rook f7 check. Despite being down 2 pawns, Hikaru is not losing. Rook h7. Maxime advances with e6. Rook e8. And it's time to draw the game with rook h1. Rook h1 is sealing the deal. If rook h1 and let's say rook g2, you can give a check. You can also play take, rook f1. You're going to win this pawn. You're going to win this pawn. Hikaru goes for a tactic, but it doesn't work. Hikaru takes on e6 and goes for this. And his logic was that after king g4, rook e6, king h5, there is rook e5, and he makes a draw. That was his point. Bishop e6, and after rook e6, rook h5, that would happen. But after this, there's a7, a7, and then there's knight c7, and you threaten promotion, and you escape with a winning endgame. Hikaru missed that, and just straight up loses a piece. He just straight up loses a piece, and Maxime just defends himself. I don't know why Maxime didn't take on g2 here. I guess he thought he was just losing the pawn. But this just goes on for a little bit. And Hikaru loses both of his matches on the first day, which is crazy. That is not a result I thought was possible. Maybe against Wesley. But that's wild. That is a wild first day. Maxime wins after a very tough match against Fabiano. And that was not the end of the story. My friends, we have arrived at the final matchup of the day. Wesley defeated Denis Lazovic in a second. So Wesley 2-0, Magnus 2-0. And here you go. Fabiano versus Alireza. I told you from now till the end of the video, you're not getting an ad. I promise you, I don't know if it's going to take 7 minutes, whatever it's going to take. This was a crazy match. Fabiano Caruana started with an Italian. Alireza Firouzja, normal, principled, brought his bishop back. And then, when the trade happened, he went knight h5. And in symmetrical positions of castling in Italians, you always got to be careful because someone's going to kill somebody else. It's like the mafia, all right? It's crazy times out here. Knight e7, knight g6. g3 was played in this position to fully lock down the f4 square so that black cannot put a knight on f4. Fabiano was doing everything in his power to prevent an attack from getting generated. And that is really nice of him because in this position, Alireza plays knight to f4 anyway. And that is how you know some you know what is about to go down. He takes the knight. This man is a psycho. He calls the bluff on Ali Reza, who promptly threatens to execute his king. Knight G1, this man sacrifices the rook. The idea is to force the king there, and now you still threaten mate. But wait, it's not mate. But wait, it is mate because of this. So how do you defend yourself? Well, obviously queen G4. That doesn't work. Actually, if you play queen G4, I take the knight. You take my queen, I take, and then I check you and I get out. And apparently, at the end of this whole sequence, black is chilling because he won so many pawns. So he doesn't want him to be chilling. Queen H3. Fabi says, let's just block the bishop. Let's just make sure the bishop doesn't get back into the game. Ali Reza plays H5. And this man, Ali Reza, is just straight up. He was down a rook for a second. But it doesn't. Rook E6, rook G6. And the attack just plays itself. With less than 1 minute on the clock, he then proceeds to pry open the bishop's diagonal. Watch this. He pries open the bishop's diagonal. He activates his dark square bishop at the end of the game, and Fabiano hangs queen F2, and the game is over. Game over. Ali Reza, I am not... He absolutely destroyed Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces. Destroyed. Destroyed. That's not a disrespect to Fabi. Ali Reza Firouzja has shown up to Toronto to kick some ass, okay? This was nuts. That is a massive loss for Fabiano, who now, right? And since you know there's 3 games, look, I'm sorry. There was no other way to hype up this thing. We got some old Indian, is what this... I'm not insulting anybody. This is literally called like the old Indian defense. D6, but knight F6, bishop F5 to stop E4, right? So... Knight H4, and look at Ali Reza taking all the bait, taking this dominant position. Look at this control of the center, playing so provocatively. Now he plays E5. The idea of E5 is simply he just wants to trade. He wants to take, trade the queens. He can't lose. G5, oh my God, look at this. Fabiano's like waving him on. He's like, Ali Reza, come get some. Knight E4, Ali Reza castles, but then somehow... He has all this space, and he's got such a great position. You can't take the pawn on D4, knight F6, check wins. Can't take, knight F6, discovered attack. But then, in an attempt to trade a lot of pieces, somehow Ali Reza took his eye off the ball. He played a couple of moves, but, you know, Fabi stayed in the game, right? And Ali Reza spent a lot of time. He was like, do I attack? Because Ali Reza's trying to not lose. He's trying to not lose. How do you play a chess game when you're trying to not lose? Queen E2, rook C1, rook D1, right? Just chill. Bishop F2, okay. And, you know, then finally Ali Reza's like, I don't know what to do. I mean, like, I'm going to trade everything. I'm going to trade everything. That's it. Can't lose now. Oh, yeah, you can. Oh, yeah. F4. Fabiano's playing for a win. Queen F5. Takes. Queen E5. We now have an insane endgame on our hands where Firouzja's trying to win with 14 seconds versus 3 minutes. Queen E1 from Fabiano, cold-blooded. What? Attacking the rook. Queen E4 check. Ali Reza takes the bait. 10 seconds on the clock. The pawn is up to D7. There's no way Fabiano's going to win this, right? Queen G1, that's it. It's over. There's no way. Fabi just starts throwing pieces. Queen E3, B4. Fabiano's playing with no rook. And now he's not even up on time anymore. And then all of a sudden... Queen E1 disconnects the white pieces, and rook takes D7. You can't take the pawn now. And all of a sudden, Fabiano Caruana's playing for a win. He plays rook C7, and when the dust settles in this long sequence of moves, he checks Ali Reza until Ali Reza's head is spinning, and then he just wins all his pawns. He just goes 2 pawns up in an endgame. Queen B2, he's going to take it at some point. He's going to win the pawn. And Firouzja still can hold with that pawn, but then he hangs the pawn. He pushes the pawn to A5, and then he just hangs a fork. He just hangs a fork. He could have played something else. He could have just, apparently it's a draw here because of how, hangs a, oh my God, and he loses. He goes on to lose the game by a forced queen trade because take. King H5 is a winning king and pawn endgame. You gotta know your king and pawn endgames, boys and girls. So we go to Armageddon. Fabiano wins the bid. He has 9:57 on the clock. All right. Knight F3, E6. It's a London. What's the best opening to play? To stall and be solid is the London system. The good old-fashioned London system. We got a big trade. Bishop B5. What the... What? Rook h5? This looks like a board mistake. What is Ali Reza doing? He's gonna put his king on g1? What's going on? No, he's gonna castle the other way. Both guys hate their kings. One guy's king is going on f8, one guy's king going that way, rook's going the other way. g6, the rook is in the center of the board. a6, bishop f6, kicking out the rook. He sacrifices it. Ali Reza sacrificed the rook. For what reason? Well, I guess it's because Fabiano's just pinned to the back rank, but he doesn't have to play like this. Now Fabiano's consolidating. But now the knight goes back to e3 and the pawn's going to fall. If the pawn falls, maybe g4, knight h4, knight 8, knight here, knight g4, knight f4, knight f5. Oh my goodness, this game is insane. Knight takes d5. Apparently, a bad move. Apparently, it was better to go here first. Apparently, if black just like doesn't do the right thing, there are various, I'm not saying you do this now, but that is the idea. Like queen g4 maybe, and then get a knight to f5. Instead, he takes, and in this position, Fabiano Caruana uncorked the most nasty move of the first day of the Champions Chess Tour final. He has a rook staring there. Wouldn't knight d3 be nice? Well, if pawn can't take, but the rook can take. Unless you sacrifice the rook! Rook to e1, disconnecting the rook from the defense of the d3 square. And also threatening to take and take. Oh my God. Ali Reza goes queen d2, and now that's it. Without the firepower of more pieces, Fabiano, it's his game to win, and he does it in style. In this position, knight takes g6. If take, knight f4 is discover check. Deflecting the white queen, queen d5, and now a gangster finish, hanging the queen into a pin, and we go to an endgame, and it's over. Rook e6, just a matter of time. Remember, Fabiano doesn't even have to win. He doesn't even have to win, but he can obviously win. But I think the players made a draw. They made a draw. Of course, it's winning, but that secures it. And after our first 2 rounds of action, the first day, Champions Chess Tour final, these are your standings. Wesley So, Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana with 2 match wins. Ali Reza, Maxime, 4th and 5th. And then Nodirbek, Hikaru, and Denis Lazovic. Now, that is a crazy bottom 3. And I think if it was the playoff time, Hikaru and Dennis would be eliminated. Now, there are still 5 more games. Hikaru's got to roar back because he hasn't even played Magnus yet. He hasn't even played Ali Reza yet. He hasn't even played Fabiano yet. Today, Hikaru played Wesley and MVL. He hasn't played a lot of the top guys, so we're going to see a ferocious Hikaru because he can't stay on the bottom 2. He's got to make it at least 3rd to 6th to enter the survival stage. I hope you enjoyed this recap. I hope to be in Toronto very, very soon. More information about the tournament can be found, you know, all online and everything. It's very fun. 500 grand at stake. That's all I have for you today. Get out of here.